Hello, and welcome to the Living Well Show, the program that strives to empower older adults to live life on their own terms. I am your host, Nicolette Hume, the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Lake Oswego Adult Community Center. Today, we will be focusing on the topic of attachment theory. Modern psychology tends to relate a lot of our current state of emotional well-being to our childhoods. And what if we took it one step further and focused on the relationship we had with our caregivers and how it relates to how we bond with our romantic partners? There is no doubt that all of us were made for connection. However, for some of us, this desire has become disorganized in our minds and in our hearts, not knowing at times how to love or trust. Today, we will be discussing what attachment theory is, what the types are, how childhood attachment patterns show up in our romantic relationships, and how to go from a dysfunctional to healthy relationship. I would like to introduce today Julie Manano, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed clinical professional counselor. Julie's mission is to make the insights and practical skills she uses to treat couples in her private practice more accessible to the wider population. Julie runs Bozeman Therapy and Counseling in Montana, where she treats couples and individuals. She is the author of Secure Love, which is a guide to getting unstuck from a negative cycle and finding attachment security with your partner. She also has a very popular Instagram account with over 500,000 followers. The title is The Secure Relationship, where she regularly shares advice for individuals and couples on how to better navigate their relationships. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Nicolette. It's a pleasure to be here. That was a really beautiful intro into attachment theory, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a real treat to have someone from out of state to show us, a different perspective, and certainly one that has captivated the minds and hearts of many online. And I have to say, the way you curate these messages is really beautiful. It's just
Thank you.
whether or not you're reading them, it's just the beauty of them is just so you can't help but look at them and help but notice
Oh, I
them.
appreciate that. Well, thank
You're
you.
welcome. And the first question that I have is, how did you go on this journey to becoming a therapist and then later on focusing on the attachment needs of individuals and couples within your practice?
Well, I really, from a very young age, knew that I wanted to be a therapist, and life took me in kind of some different directions. And in college, I've consistently got the message that you'll never be able to make any money going into psychology. So I decided to take a different direction. And then after being a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, I still had that urge in me. So I went back to grad school, and with the intention of not wanting to work with marriages and couples at all, not even a little bit. Had to get an LMFT because that was the main license in California, where I lived at the time, in Los Angeles. That was the license that almost every therapist in California has. So I had to get this licensed marriage and family therapist to work, and I was very resentful of the fact that it was called this, because I did not want to work with this population. However, while I was working on my hours for licensure, I did have to see some couples to complete those hours. Fell absolutely in love with couples work. And the reason that that is so is because I was able to, when I was working with individuals, what I was finding is I was giving them this emotional support that they weren't getting in other parts of their lives. And there was a really strong bond forming between us. And that was great, except for they were leaving without that bond with the other people in their lives. And so when I started working with couples, I thought it was awesome, because these partners were bonding with each other and leaving my office with this beautiful gift in their real lives. And not to, say that they're not to dismiss the value and beauty of individual work, but for me, it felt really, really good to facilitate bonds between people and partners. I also really just enjoy the intellectual challenge piece of working with two people at the same time. And it's just very stimulating work, very fulfilling work for me on an emotional and intellectual level. And I got into attachment because I honestly, I find it absolutely the most effective way to approach relationships is through the lens of attachment.
So speaking of attachment, what exactly is attachment theory?
Well, so attachment theory is the idea that humans are driven to feel emotionally safe with other humans. And it's very similar to the fact that we're driven to eat, we're driven to reproduce. And it's really, if you want to break it down scientifically, it's part of our survival strategies. Humans just cannot survive the wild alone. We need other humans to help us with shelter and with food. And so we have this drive to connect with others. Modern day humans have a drive to connect, most of us, with one significant special partner. And we have a system in our body called the attachment behavioral system, which is a mind-body connection, and it is activated when we have attachment distress. So if our nervous system picks up that there is some sort of rupture with an important person in our life, and in my line of work, that's couples, so partners, then we are supposed to feel a level of anxiety. And that level of anxiety is what is going to motivate us to reconnect with our loved one, or repair, or somehow refine that connection. And if, in the situation of a death, and that, the reconnection isn't possible, then that attachment system is going to create grieving, a profound sense of grieving, depending on the level of the attachment connection.
So basically,
does that make sense?
Yes. So it sounds like what you experience as a child, so your attachment to a caregiver, whether it's a mother, father, or someone else, that later on it does show up within that whomever you are bonded to, that there's going to be some relationship there. Am I hearing that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes. See, what happens is that the quality of the attachment security between the caregiver and the child is going to translate into the quality that that person later is going to find themselves in with partners. And let me just explain. Do you want me to kind of go into the 4 different attachment styles? Because I think that can help
Absolutely.
your viewers understand. Okay. So a child who has a caregiver who is now, when I say emotionally supportive and responsive, what I mean is providing comfort, responding to the child's distress, validating the child's emotions, helping the child feel valued and as if the child brings joy to their life, helping the child feel safe and protected. And there are a few more beyond that, but those are the basics. And so when a caregiver is providing those things unpredictably, then what happens is the child learns to not know whether or not their emotional needs are going to be met at any given moment. They might get met, they might not get met. And more importantly, the child learns that if I have to come up with these ways to be noticed, right? I'm not just going to get responded to because I ask for it. I've got to protest or cry or get angry or be a really good, perfect child, or be a good helper, or any number of ways that this child is going to be responded to. And that's driven not by a sense of security, but it's driven by a sense of anxiety. So that's what we would call an anxious attachment, which is this child has a kind of a hypervigilance around, are they going to respond to me? Are they not? What do I need to do to be responded to? Even when they are responded to, they can't completely trust it because they don't know if they'll get that response again. So this is going to translate to a partner in an adult relationship that can never really fully settle. They'll never really believe, is my partner really going to show up for me? Are they really going to help me feel valued and help me feel validated and supported? And they're very critical. They tend to focus on the moments when they're not getting their needs met, because that's their nervous system and their attachment behavioral system saying, make sure you're safe, make sure you're safe. So the other issue here is that they're often drawn to other partners who are unpredictably available because that's what they know. That's what they experienced in childhood, and that's what they know. And so the second type of an insecure attachment would be called an avoidant attachment. And those children really never got emotional support. A lot of times their physical needs are taken care of, their educational needs are taken care of, and they can be really well taken care of, but their parents just simply don't know how to provide emotional comfort, provide any kind of emotional reflection or curiosity, just very, very little emotional support. And so what these children learn is they learn just to deactivate their attachment system, meaning stuff it out of awareness and just focus on other things, distract with activities, feel loved for other things, being a lot of times those with an avoidant attachment end up being kind of very successful or high achievers, because these are the ways that they find they can get some kind of second best emotional support. And then these folks will grow up and usually have a very, very difficult time accessing and putting words to their emotional experiences. And that gets in the way of their ability to be emotionally supportive to themselves or to others. And so they tend to end up in relationships with anxious partners. And I'll explain the reason for that later. And then we have disorganized is the other version of an insecure attachment. And these children typically grew up in homes that were just very chaotic, very unsafe, or just very deprived of, grossly neglectful, we could say. And these children just had very little hope of ever getting their attachment needs met. There's no strategy that would work. And so they lived a lot of their life with an inner sense of disorganization and chaos, and just never really having the experience of feeling safe and secure. And if they did, it was very fleeting. These folks have a very difficult time trusting other people. They usually believe that other people want to hurt them, even their partners, even when their partner doesn't want to hurt them. It's very easy for them to go there. They have a very hard time with communication skills, a very hard time with their own self-regulation. And then the fourth type is the ideal type, and that's my job, is to help people reach this place, which is called a secure attachment. And children who grew up with a secure attachment, they experienced parents who could provide emotional support and comfort enough of the time. Now, we're not looking for perfect parenting, but we're looking for enough of the time the child believed that they could reach for support, reach for comfort, reach for physical affection, and they would be responded to in a positive way. They grew up believing that they bring joy to their caregiver's life. They grew up feeling valued and with appropriate boundaries. They grew up feeling appreciated, wanted, and confident, right? And so these folks, they another thing that they received in childhood childhood was help with their emotions. So parents who can say to their kids, oh, you must, reflect their emotions back to them. Oh, I can see you're angry, or I can see you're sad, or let's talk about that. That's how a person learns to recognize their own emotional world and put words to their emotional experiences in a way that doesn't feel shaming. And so they grow up and they tend to gravitate toward relationships where they can access their emotions, share their emotions, regulate their emotions. And when we can regulate our emotions, partners can co-regulate each other, meaning that they can calm each other down, for lack of a better word. If one partner is regulated and the other one's distressed, then the regulated partner can reach and just touch, or say, hey, I'm right here with you, which brings the other partner's nervous system down. So the self-regulation part is what happens when someone has a secure attachment within themselves. And then when you have a secure attachment within yourself, then we have two people who can co-regulate each other. So that's kind of my goal, is to help partners not only find a secure attachment between each other, but between themselves, and the two of those feed off of each other.
Well, and it sounds like, with these different attachment styles, I can almost assume that with the, I forgot what your word was for it, but the 3 different attachment styles that were not healthy. There was a specific
Insecure.
word that you, insecure.
Insecure attachments, yes.
That if you have an insecure attachment, you may have a hard time listening to yourself, because it's all about what's externally going on or happening around you or happening to you, as opposed to, I'm thinking, in a secure person internally has a whole world within there, that they are in touch with that, versus the other. So out of curiosity, if you have an insecure attachment, are you able to change that? Like, how does someone, and if they can, how does that happen?
Oh, absolutely. You can heal from an insecure attachment. Now, there are a couple ways to do that. You can, the way I like to facilitate that healing is by working with the individuals in the context of their relationship, because, just like I said, an insecure attachment exists in first exists in the context of relationship with the caregiver. So I think it's ideal to treat an insecure attachment in the context of a relationship, because that's where you're going to have most of these feelings show up, and you have both people in the room. And so what you're teaching people to do is you're teaching them to have access to their emotions, be able to notice in their body, like, what's happening for me right now, somatically, what's happening. Is my stomach tightening up? Is my throat tightening up? And if so, what is the word that I can give this feeling? What's the name I can give this emotion? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it joy? Is it touched? And then helping people communicate those feelings. And then when you can become aware of your feelings, then you can become aware of your emotional needs. And I'm also there to kind of help people understand what their emotional needs are in a relationship. So, for example, in a secure relationship, we need to have attachment needs met. And those attachment needs are also basically our relationship emotional needs. So if a couple has a secure attachment, they feel valued, each partner feels valued, feels cared for, feels appreciated, feels like you're going to be there for me if I need you most of the time, validated, like I can get it right for you, like the bar won't just keep going higher and higher. And so when couples have this felt experience with each other, let's say 75 to 90% of the time, and that other percentage of the time when they have ruptures, they're able to repair and get back to connectedness. That's what we would consider a secure attachment. And to extrapolate that to a secure attachment with yourself, you also have that experience internalized within yourself, meaning I can validate my own feelings. I get why I'm mad right now. I understand why I'm mad right now, and I'm okay with the fact that I'm mad right now. I'm not going to shame myself and say, "Oh, I shouldn't be mad. I shouldn't feel this way." But I'm also going to manage that mad in a way that's productive and healthy. Instead of yelling at someone, I'm going to figure out what is it that I'm needing right now and how can I communicate that. And so that's an example of being able to validate oneself, right? And yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I wonder too. So let's say someone watching this program, they're like, some of the things you said really hit home about, the avoidant attachment style or anxious, and because those tend to be the two primary insecure attachments, and from what I understand, disorganized attachment tends to be not as many people within that category, or people who were kind of severely abused in childhood. Is that right?
Well, you are right that it's a lower percentage of the population. However, I think that percentage is probably higher than what we realize, and I think it's probably higher than if we were to do more studies now. But it's still the lowest. Yes, there is a misconception that it does require child abuse. It does not require child abuse. It just requires a pervasive lack of emotional support and an impoverished environment, sometimes just socioeconomic factors alone. A single parent who's out of the house because they're working three jobs and, that is just unable to be there. That's enough to create a disorganized attachment. Not that it necessarily will.
Is it like if we were talking about, you gave the example of maybe a single income household where that caregiver is, working three jobs or what have you. So could it be that you have someone experiencing avoidant attachment in childhood, and that there's just kind of like consistent withdrawal there, whereas disorganized, it could be like, maybe they're seeing their parent and it's great, and then it's like, then it's not good, or maybe even the highs and lows of certain mental illnesses that a parent could be experiencing, and not
Yes.
really
Yes.
knowing what to look
The
out for, or the change, or the
the
reason for the changes in their personality. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the one common thread among all caregivers in studies of disorganized attached children is unresolved trauma. So that's the one thing that all parents of disorganized do have in common, is that there's unresolved trauma, and that's going to show up in all sorts of different ways.
That is
Parents who
so
just kind of
hard.
all of a sudden go blank, that trauma might show up as what you're saying, like mental illness, that then gets acted out in ways that aren't what's in the best interest of the child. Very sad, very,
Oh,
very sad stuff.
definitely. And also, too, so if someone is identifying with some of these things, like a viewer, and they're wanting to do some of this work on their own, is that possible? Or is it just that when we do have a romantic partner in our life, it's a lot easier for these mirrors to show up with, we have someone who's reacting to how we're acting, or vice versa. Is it possible to do it on your own, to make these things, to heal from it, or
Yes.
to move into secure? Could you talk a little
Yes,
bit
it
more about
is.
that?
Sure. Well, I mean, ideally, if someone has a personal therapist, that's a great way to start, because you are developing a relationship with the therapist. So all of your relationship issues and in that closeness of a relationship are probably going to show up. And a therapist who's trained to work with attachment will know what to do with that. And then you can, really, when you're working on a secure attachment individually, you're working on your relationship with yourself, right? And so you're, like I said, you're learning to validate your own emotions. You're learning to provide yourself with emotional support. What am I needing right now? I'm feeling sad. What am I needing right now? How can I find comfort for myself? And that comfort might be seeking, support from a friend. It might be going on a walk. It might be doing something that's healthy, right? So it's kind of like becoming your own secure caregiver, like having this part of yourself that's a secure parent that is with you at all times. And that's actually how people who are secure adults, just by virtue of growing up as a secure child, they've internalized their caregiver, their secure caregiver, and that becomes a part of them. And so children who don't have that internalized, they can learn to develop that part. Another way is skills, learning better communication skills, learning how to communicate from a secure, authentic place within yourself instead of the scared child part of yourself. That's building up that secure place inside of you. Every time you communicate, every time you're brave and you're able to find this secure place in yourself, you are strengthening that part of you. You can learn to, question the intentions of others instead of just assuming based on these old templates of how people are. Oh, that person must be mad at me, or, oh, this person I feel rejected. Start questioning what might be this person's intention, what might actually be going on with this person other than what might go to is. This is called social cognition. It's the awareness of what might be going on with other people. Self-regulation skills, huge. How can I learn to calm and regulate my own nervous system? If you have a problem with that as an adult, clearly you did not have a childhood in which someone was helping you regulate your nervous system with co-regulation. So now you need to learn how to do that for yourself. And then if you're in a partnership later, then you learn to co-regulate. Like I said, self-regulation leads to co-regulation, leads to self-regulation. It all is, intertwined. Babies aren't born with self-regulation skills. They learn self-regulation skills with co-regulation skills. So again, now we're circling back to individual therapy, where a therapist is providing you with emotional support skills that help your nervous system feel regulated. So they're co-regulating you so that you can learn to co-regulate yourself.
And I think if people had the chance before entering into certain relationships to kind of understand maybe where they are coming from in regards to attachment and how they show up in that way, that it could be very impactful to having a healthy relationship with someone else and also with themselves. And so, as you talk again about the different types of attachment, what is the most commonly attached couple? And then what is the most ideal attached couple?
Well, there's only one ideal, and the only one ideal is secure. And that's because it's going to, if one partner has some insecurities, we're going to have some trouble. And so when I treat couples, and sometimes one partner can maybe be more secure than the other, but really what we're needing two people who are securely attached. If we have two people who are avoidantly attached, they're not going to stay together because there's going to be nobody there maintaining the closeness of the relationship. So the function of the anxious attached partner is to seek connection. The function of the avoidant attached partner is to prevent enmeshment and to keep things from getting worse. So if you have two people who are avoidant, there's just not enough connection to make it sustainable. And very low proportion of the population. If you have two anxious attached partners, there's just too much escalation. There's too much protest. There's just too much intensity there. So that relationship is unlikely to be sustainable. What I see in my practice is that 100% of the couples I treat fall into the anxious avoidant dynamic. And if they, attachment styles aren't super, for some people they're rigid, for some people they're more flexible, right? So somebody could have some avoidant tendencies, but get into a relationship with a very avoidant partner, and that avoidance is going to bring out the anxiousness in them. Because what's going to happen is they're going to create a negative cycle between the two of them. And the negative cycle is going to look like this. They're humming along, they're doing okay. Everything's great in the relationship. And then all of a sudden, the anxious partner starts to sense that the avoidant partner is distancing a little bit. The anxious partner gets kind of panicky and starts reaching for connection, kind of protesting, maybe getting critical, saying things like, "You never pay attention to me." And then the avoiding partner is going, "Oh no, I'm failing, and I don't know how, or I don't know why, or this is too much for me, and I don't know what to do, and I'm overwhelmed." And then they manage that anxiety by shutting down. And so then when they shut down, the anxious partner gets panicked and starts to become more escalated and more reaching for connection, which pushes the avoidant partner away further. And this does not have to start with the anxious partner. I'm just using this as an example because the negative cycle, it doesn't start anywhere. It's just a dynamic that gets created. So couples are going to a lot of people are going to start out in a relationship already anxious or avoidant because that's pretty strong inside of them. But if they don't, if they're insecurely attached, they're going to create that dynamic in the relationship as a way to create emotional balance. Again, two avoidant partners, it's emotionally imbalanced in one way. Two anxious partners, it's emotionally imbalanced the other way. When you have an avoidant and anxious come together, it does create some balance. It's a second best version of balance. What we want is two people to come together who have inner balance. We want that to be where the balance from the relationship comes from. They're emotionally balanced inside. I'm in touch with my emotions, but I'm not overwhelmed by my emotions. Well, if you have an anxious and avoidant come together, the anxious partner is overwhelmed by their emotions. The avoidant partner is out of touch with their emotions. And so they kind of even each other out. I mean, to be honest with you, some couples can do this for decades and hum along and be a good enough couple. You see them, right? You see those people who've been married for 60, 70 years and it's not perfect and they're bickering a lot or whatever, or the husband is super withdrawn and the wife is super nitpicky, but they make it work. That's happens. It's not ideal, but it's also not the end of the world all the time. Yeah.
Well, and there's also this sense of security that regardless, that person is still there. Like,
yes,
even in the dysfunction, he is still in the other room or she's still in the other room. We're still connected on some level. And I am curious though, like, let's say you had an anxious attached person, or maybe even disorganized, and they were with someone who was securely attached. Can that securely attached person's influence, so to speak, help bring up that insecure or not anxious or disorganized person to a place of security? Can they help balance them?
Theoretically, yes, if they don't get exhausted and burnt out first. That person has to be willing to stay in that relationship or get into it to begin with. So it's tricky because a securely attached person is going to be attracted to another securely attached person because that's just what they're comfortable with. So this is real life. So yes, sometimes securely attached people end up with insecurely attached people, and it's either going to go one way or the other. One of two ways. One way is that secure person is going to create enough safety in the relationship that does help the insecure partner feel more safe and secure, and their behaviors will shift around that. Or the securely attached person is not going to be comfortable in that relationship and want to get out of it.
Well, and in regards to a person who has avoidant, attachment, how do you get them to emotionally engage with you? Because I can almost sense that they may be the people that you hear about saying like, oh, that person is way too clingy, like that they may
Sure.
be those people that you hear them talking about that about other people that they're dating, or always talking about other people's needs. They're just too much. I don't have time for
Hmm.
that, or even affection may just be too much for them. I'm assuming,
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong. But how would you get them to emotionally engage with you if you were on the other end of that and you were desiring that and didn't want your needs to push them away?
Well, I did want to say there is one other caregiving behavior that is common to avoid those with an avoided attachment, and that is, oh, I forgot the word. It's like overbearing, kind of an overbearing type of trying to force the child to talk about their feelings, trying to force the child into emotional connection. And what happens is the child develops the idea that emotions aren't safe. They're intrusive. Intrusive is the word. It's intrusive. It feels yucky. It feels bad. And so they disconnect. So those are the types of people who are likely to be like, whoa, 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 connection feels yucky. I don't like that. And the way that that would need to be approached is the person who's needing more from them would need to be really clear about that. And they would need to say, here's what I'm needing. I'm needing, to know that I can be connected with you. I need to know that that you can show me all of you. I need to know that, or, all of you, that's appropriate. I need to know that you can show up with emotional support. Here's what I'm needing. And are you willing to help me with this? And that's really, if they're willing to help you with this, then that's really, there's lots of different ways to go about it at that point, if they're willing to help. And that is, first of all, they need to feel that emotional connection is safe. They need to start experiencing emotional connection is safe. And just the way that that was communicated is safe, because it's not,
Yeah.
you're wrong, you're all bad, you're getting it wrong, you're broken. It's, here's what I'm needing. Let's work on this right now. What is it that you're needing? And so we need to teach them that, not only is emotional connection safe, but you can have emotional boundaries, because they may have not learned growing up that it's okay to have emotional boundaries. We need to help this person learn to access and sit with their emotions and sit with the emotional experience and learn, okay, emotions are hard, but they're not going to kill me. I can do this. I can survive this. I can learn to put this into words. We need to take the shame out of emotions for an avoidant individual. But all of this, none of this can happen unless they're willing to do that. And so the way to get someone to be willing to do that is to create a safe environment around that work. And the reason that a lot of avoidants are resistant to help and therapy, one of the reasons is because they view it as another environment in which they're going to feel like they're failing. And for an avoidant partner, or for a person with an avoidant personality, their biggest fear is either being seen as a failure or seeing themselves as a failure. So they need to experience
Okay.
success. So I always tell anxious partners, when your avoidant partner does show up for you, reward that. A lot of times anxious partners, they're so convinced of rejection and they're so hypervigilant to any of the negative signs that they'll say, well, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And so I have to kind of move them into, reward them for what they are getting right. And that doesn't mean you want to settle, but there's a balance to be had there.
That makes a lot of sense, though. And I could see the anxious person, if they were being hypercritical and like, I'm not getting enough of this, that, or the
Mm-hmm.
other, that would just continue to push the avoidant partner away or clam up, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes leave the relationship
Right. And when they
altogether.
do that, now what are they reinforcing in the anxious partner? They're reinforcing the
Yes.
anxious partner's anxiousness, because they're not showing up saying, hey, this doesn't feel good for me. When I feel criticized so
Yeah.
much of the time, it doesn't help me feel safe and close to you. So how can we work on this? So they're not showing up either. So it's just this, vicious cycle that they get stuck in.
So speaking of cycles, what are some of the negative cycles that show up within the different attachment styles? And then how can we avoid that? Or if these couplings do have a conflict, how do we repair them?
Well, so again, in my work with couples, I'm always going to see them falling into an anxious avoidant cycle, or sometimes we call it a pursue withdraw cycle, and it's always going to follow the trajectory of one partner is, well, I'm trying to think here. There's different cycles. Let's say, okay, here's a good example of a cycle. An avoidant partner gets angry with their anxious partner about something, but the avoidant partner is afraid of conflict because they either get overwhelmed with conflict, or they think conflict is shaming or bad or going to hurt the relationship, and so they hold that in, and they hold that anger in, and then the anger comes out in little bits and spurts as snapping or overreacting to something that's completely unrelated to the original situation. And then the anxious partner says, feels snapped at and rejected and angry, and the anxious partner protests back, and then the avoidant partner is, completely shuts down and withdraws. So we got to find where each of these cycles start. Okay, so we have to find, what I do is I go in and I say, where's the first trigger? Who was triggered first in this situation? Now, a lot of times couples are living in a negative cycle, but we're just looking at flares. And then sometimes healthier couples aren't. So sometimes we're just looking at the flares. And so if in that case, I would say, where did this flare start? So it started with this avoidant partner. So I need to know, why did this avoidant partner not show up and talk about the anger or the feelings? Why didn't they show up and say, hey, when you said that, it left me feeling like maybe, I'm not being appreciated over here. Can you help me with that? Was that, maybe approaching it with curiosity? Was that what was happening with you? Maybe approaching it with vulnerability. I felt kind of sad and disconnected from you. Can you help me with that? And that's going to create, if that couple knows how to navigate that, if the anxious partner knows how to be responsive to that because they've learned through therapy or whatever, then that's going to take that negative cycle that happened and give it a new trajectory. No matter what, it's going to go in a better direction than the avoidant partner not talking about it and snapping later.
That cycle is just so common. I mean, and I am curious, is if you did have someone who was securely attached and someone who is anxious, could they find themselves within that cycle?
Yeah, so, even people who are securely attached will show up with a light version of a pursuer withdrawer dynamic. Almost all couples are going to have it, and they might have different roles in different parts of their relationship. For example, in the financial area, one might be more of a pursuer, one might be more of a withdrawer, if that's a sticking place for them. A lot of times with sex, the roles can reverse. We might have an emotional pursuer and an emotional withdrawer, but a switch when it comes to sex. The emotional pursuer is the sexual withdrawer. Do you want me to kind of explain what it would look like in the scenario I gave you if we were talking about a secure partner and an avoidant partner?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so if one partner was more secure and, let's say, had been working on themselves and was really trying to show up in new ways in the relationship, and to go back to your point, that can happen. One person can be really growing into security. And so, yes, that would be a situation where we might see a partner who's secure and a partner who is still insecure. In fact, I'm kind of embarrassed right now because that's what I advocate for on social media when I don't have the couple to work with, is I say, you grow you grow and pull your partner up with you. That doesn't guarantee it's going to happen, but it's very likely that it will happen.
Yeah.
And so what would happen is the avoidant partner gets angry and then later snaps. And instead of that now secure partner being reactive and say, why do you always snap at me? I don't deserve to be treated like that. Instead, they say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening right now? Because everything seemed to be okay. And they would probably just, either approach it from a place of security, or they would approach it from a place of, that felt really bad for me just then. Wow. I mean, I'm can we talk about this? They would start that conversation and respond from a place of less reactivity. I'm not saying you can't have people don't have passion. People have passion, but it's not a reactive, like just fight response. They're going to respond not from a place of criticism, but more from a place of curiosity, in a supportive way, maybe a comforting way. Hey, let me just hold your hand right now. I can see something's up. What's going on? Talk to me. And see what happens there is that you do that avoidant partner now is going to that's going to help that partner feel safe. And then they can talk through that with repeated episodes like that. Yes, that actually can help that avoidant start to feel safe and become
I can definitely
securely
see that.
attached. Yeah.
And
I apologize
also,
for just now making that distinction. I should have, I apologize for just now making that distinction. When you asked me earlier, I was kind of thinking of people coming together at the beginning. So,
no, I think that that's important to talk about all aspects of it. And, and then even that part of, it's almost like if you are able to break through the charades and just say how you really feel, which
yes,
sounds really easy in theory, but it's so hard to do. And it really is all centered around vulnerability, which who doesn't want to be vulnerable?
Yes, it's so true. And
even with people that you've been with for a long time, it could still be a difficult thing. Which seems like it should be easier as time goes on, but I don't think it ever is for people.
It doesn't get easier until you start practicing and getting good results from it. And then your nervous system starts to trust it. And the hard part is putting in that work at the beginning when you just don't trust it. That's the hard part. But if you have a partner who has learned how to show up and hold that vulnerability, you'll start getting positive results with it. And then it just becomes easier and easier over time.
Well, and also too, so let's say we have some individuals that are watching this and they're like, okay, this sounds like where we are. What do we do about it? If they're seeking out a counselor, what type of therapy should they look for? Should it just be, as you said, like there's the general, family, marriage therapist, but I know that there are different therapies that could be helpful for exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, for individuals. Okay, so I am a big fan of what's called somatic experiencing, which you can find at traumahealing.org. It's the shortened version is SE. That is a type of therapy that focuses on processing and recognizing and processing and even putting words to emotions through the body. So I like to explain it like this, in normal talk therapy, which is great, but has its limits, we often are using talking to defend against actually feeling. So in somatic work, they don't really allow you, for lack of a better word, to talk over your feelings. You have to talk through your feelings. So if they can tell that you're starting to get dysregulated, they're going to say, okay, what's going on in your body right now, and bring you back to a place of regulation before you move forward. So this is now retraining your brain to naturally find places of regulation. Another one I recommend is called Internal Family Systems. Short version is IFS. Not sure what a website for that is, but they're easy to find, or there's definitely one out there. That is parts work, where you're working with different parts of self. So you would be working with your, the sad part of you, the angry part of you, all these different parts of self, and integrating them into one. That's also kind of attachment, definitely related to attachment theory. An attachment-based therapist who is trained to work on the therapy is about analyzing the relationship between the therapist and the client. So we're going to get attachment issues come up in that relationship. Psychodynamic therapy does that. That's kind of a traditional version of attachment therapy. And then EFIT, which is, I do what's called EFT, which is emotion focused therapy for couples. And then EFIT is emotion focused individual therapy. And that is the same type of work I do with couples, but with individuals. So you're almost like elucidating cycles within yourself, or maybe cycles that you have with coworkers, and learning about and healing attachment wounds by looking at the cycles as they show up outside of, a romantic relationship. The other types of therapy are great, like cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm sure you've heard of, and that's great. It just isn't that kind of therapy isn't going to address everything. So
yeah, but I can see how some of the therapies that you talked about it almost sounds like you're internalizing the therapy as opposed to just, sharing what you're feeling in the traditional therapy sense. So
I really
find
like
that to be a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I like the way that you worded that. It's exactly how I would describe it, is internalizing it. A lot of times people get stuck in a therapy where they're getting a lot of emotional support, but emotional support is not therapy. Emotional support is emotional support. Therapists are experts at being emotionally supportive so that we can have people feel safe with us, so that we can do actual therapy with them. So if you're finding that you're going to therapy and you're feeling really safe and emotionally supported, and it feels really warm and fuzzy and great, and you enjoy having someone hearing you and seeing you, but you're not actually getting better in your real life, then that's something that you might want to take a second look at.
That is a really good point. A really good point.
Yeah.
Especially when, some individuals I've known have been in therapy for a very, very, very long time, and sometimes do feel like, have I really gotten anywhere? It is more of that emotional support that they may not have currently in their life that has been nurturing them in that way, but maybe not helping them in the way that it could.
Sure.
But as our show comes to an end, what are some final words of wisdom that you would like our viewers to take with them?
Oh gosh. Okay, let me think here. Well, I think that, kind of speaking to attachment theory and just the field of psychology in general, everything is headed in the direction of attachment theory. So if you are really looking for the best type of therapy possible, I would find someone who works from an attachment perspective. And here's why: because that type of therapy addresses every part of the human experience. We're addressing the cognitive meanings that you're making of events. We're addressing the somatic experiences of your feelings. We're addressing the secondary protective emotions, such as anger, and how those are kind of covering up vulnerability, like sadness and grief and loneliness. And we're attaching all of that to the behaviors. So how do all these things come together in a trigger and show up in a behavior, either at the market with a checker who just said something rude to you, or in your relationship with your partner? And so I think it's just a very comprehensive way to work. And yeah, I guess that's what I would leave people with.
Anyhow, thank you so much for coming on our show today, all the way from Montana. I just really enjoyed learning from you today, and I hope all of you enjoyed as well. So thank you again,
Well,
Julie.
thank you. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
You're welcome. And
Yeah.
as you've learned today, everybody, we are certainly all a work in progress, but there is always hope. And just because we started out in life one way and how we see the world and how we experience the world does not mean that it's our lifelong trajectory. We can always change that. And I hope that this has given you the courage to look within, and also giving you the courage to maybe approach our relationships in a way that gets us to a new place of healing and growth. That's it for today. I'm your host, Nicolette Hume. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And as always, be kind, be safe, and always stay curious. Take care.